Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this webinar. I will be hosting today's meeting. The purpose of this presentation is to provide you with an overview of the current state of the Omega-9 oils business and a preview of several announcements we see occurring later this year. We hope you'll consider using some of this content in your continuing coverage of the food industry. We do hope to have time for questions at the end of this presentation. And if you do have additional questions after today, please reach out to me directly. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce today's presenters. David Dyziak is the commercial lead of grains and oils at Dow AgroSciences and our primary spokesperson for this business. Dave Boer is the group leader of the healthy oils category for Dow AgroSciences, and he works primarily with food service clients. Mary Kay LaGuardia is a market manager for Omega-9 oils and works primarily with food processing companies. And finally, Greg Gingera is part of our canola research team based in Saskatchewan, Canada. In the interest of time, and as a follow-up to this webinar, I will be sending out short bio information on each of today's presenters for your files and future coverage. And with that, I'll turn it over to David Dyziak to begin the presentation. Dave?
Hey, thanks very much, and good morning, everyone. And again, thank you for taking time out of your schedules to spend some time with us here today. So first, what I would like to do is introduce Dow AgroSciences to you all. So we're the agricultural science business of Dow Chemical. Our headquarters are in Indianapolis, Indiana, and we are very much a research-based, sort of technology-driven, really focused around plant science and focused around agriculture. And so a lot of the products that we create take 10, 15 years to develop, and so we're a very research-intensive company, and we're really one of the 6 major research-based companies sort of in the agriculture, plant science, plant genetics industry today. Last year, we had a great milestone. We exceeded $7 billion in sales, and our spend in R&D is quite heavy, very similar actually to what the pharmaceutical industry would spend, and we invest over 10% of our revenues back into basic research. And, despite, kind of the breadth and scope of the overall company, the oils program within Dow AgroSciences is a very important part of our overall growth plan and of our overall business strategy. And so we'd just like to really take today and give you some perspective on what it really takes to bring these oils really to market and make them available to the food industry. Often we don't really think much about where food comes from and about the supply chain that is involved with it. So looking at this kind of flow chart here, we can really see that to get these new oils brought to market is a pretty extensive process. And Dow AgroSciences really works across the whole value chain, helping to get this system aligned and get it organized so that we can deliver our healthy oils to the end-use markets and to consumers. And so it kind of starts with plant breeding and getting planting seed into a bag that we can get it to producers, to farmers. And Greg Gingera will talk about that process with us here later on. Very involved, very interesting science that we do around plant breeding. The next step is really to get our crop produced on farm. And so, agriculture is a very big, vast, broad, high volume system. And so we need to identity preserve. That's what IP means in there. So we need identity preservation systems with growers and with the grain industry to really get this crop produced on farm, to keep it segregated so that we can preserve the quality, and then get that delivered through the elevation system, get it delivered to processors so that they can then convert the oil seed from what the farmers produce into its co-product streams around, in this case, Omega-9 oil and in high-protein meal. In North America, we work with several, or actually most of the leading processors that are involved in the oil industry today, companies like ADM, Bunge, Louis Dreyfus, Richardson Oilseeds, Stratus Foods, Ventura Foods, Viterra, which is now Glencore. So we work with leading processors. We've got a very broad manufacturing base and distribution scope to make this oil available across the entire continent and actually internationally too to different food companies. And of course, a big part of what we do too is to work with the food service operators, work with the food manufacturers. And so because this oil is different, for many decades, oil was really just a commodity. And we've done a lot of work to value add to the oil, to give a new functionality, to give it a new set of benefits. And so our group is primarily involved in building awareness and comprehension with the end users about how to put these new oils to work, their health benefits, and to really help with the demand creation process. As I just touched on, oils and fats have really evolved a lot in how we think about them and they fit within our diet. And, oil, fat, is essentially about a third of our calories. It's such a huge part of our overall diet. And it's really something that we don't probably think about in terms of food when we're eating it. We're focused around the sensory, around taste, maybe around health or not health related to depending what you're eating that day. But it really is a very large and important part of our diet. And the attitude towards dietary oils has really changed dramatically in the course of the last 30 years as the scientific understanding of the role of oil in our diet has really evolved quite a bit. So it wasn't that long ago, you go back, maybe I'm showing my age here, but you go back into the early 80s, and really fat was bad. And, the guidance was really to avoid fat in our diet. At that time, too, there was a lot of controversy around tropical oils, which were high in saturated fat, and the impact on coronary heart disease that they believed that imparted. And that really prompted this a large switch at that time in the late 70s, early 80s to really use and adopt hydrogenated oils. And so we could take a North American commodity crop like soybean, and we could change the functionality of it through hydrogenation. And again, hydrogenation is a process where they use heat and a nickel catalyst, and they kind of react that, and they can make a change in the actual fatty acid structures within the oil. And so you can change it from this natural oil, you can hydrogenate it, and really give it different forms of functionality. You can make it more stable for use in a variety of different foods. And as we look along this timeline, we see how the nutrition guidance really has changed. The USDA every 5 years, I think starting back in 1980 was the first one, every 5 years the USDA gives new dietary guidance around new dietary guidelines. And so we can see over time that the attitude really has changed. We've gone from fat being bad and to avoid it, to really beginning to identify the elements within fat that are bad, first focused around saturates, and then, around 10, 15 years ago, it became very clear that trans fats were very unhealthy, but they were also ubiquitous across the food supply. They were virtually everywhere. And so the Institutes of Medicine and other expert committees began to really give guidance that we needed to get trans fats out of the diet. And that really prompted the new solutions. What do you replace hydrogenated soybean oil with? And at that time, that was probably 90% of the oil used across the North American food supply. And that prompted companies like us to take a look at what could solutions be, and we began to do our plant breeding program to create these naturally stable oils. And we're at the point in time today where really groups like the dietary guidelines and like the American Heart Association are really giving pretty firm and strong guidance of the need to keep saturates low, to eliminate trans, and that's also led now to the regulatory actions to really remove GRAS status for partially hydrogenated oils, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. So a large evolution in how we look at fat. And that change around diet and demand really has prompted a large shift in what kind of oils that we eat. If you go back 10 years ago, soybean oil made up the majority of the fat in the North American diet. And so that really was about 70-80% of the total fat that we consumed. And you can see that canola and palm oil were very, very used at a very low level. But some three main forces of change happened here to prompt this switch. And so we have trans fat labeling happened around 2004, 2005, and then that prompted a removal or a switch, a migration away from hydrogenated soybean oil. That then drove an increase in oils like canola and in palm oil to replace fully hydrogenated oils. You can see that growth curve. And it also prompted a large shift in demand for canola. We had these new oil profiles available, and we wanted to make them more widely available. At that time, too, you remember back to the spike in commodity prices and kind of the last energy crisis, we've had this large shift come forward to adopt biodiesels, adopt renewable fuels. And so, the government mandated amount of biodiesel that had to be within our energy supply. And soybean oil became the oil of choice really for the biodiesel industry. And that prompted, any volume that was lost by soybeans in food was readily absorbed by the biofuel industries to support the energy security mandates put forward by the government. So that was a real key driver in this switch also. So through these changes, you can see that canola is now the second largest oil used by the U.S. food industry, and that demand continues to grow and expand. So, what exactly did we do with these oils here? So through plant breeding, we were able to create naturally stable oils. And oil is really a mixture of different fatty acids. So oil just isn't one thing. Within that oil, there's a number of different fatty acids. Things like oleic, linoleic make up, and saturates make up the majority of those fatty acids. And if you change the ratio of those fatty acids, change the ratio of oleic to linoleic, you can really affect the functionality of the oil. So change the ratio, you can change the functionality of the oil. And one of the ways to measure it is in this first column labeled OSI, which is the oxidative stability index. So it's a way to give a relative measure of how stable different oils are. So if we look at the row with Omega-9 canola versus commodity canola before it, we can see that we made a large increase in the oleic content of the oil. And oleic is the same fatty acid as monounsaturates, or they're also called Omega-9. Omega-9 is the common scientific term for oleic acid. And so we increased the amount of the Omega-9 content, and we made a large decrease in the amount of the 18-3s, or the linoleic content. And the 18-3s are about 100 times less stable than the 18-1s. So the 18-3s, that 3 means how many double bonds are in that fatty acid. And so you got more double bonds, you have more places for a reaction to happen, oxidation to happen, and that can really affect the stability. So if we look further on this chart across and looking at partially hydrogenated soybean oil, that was the industry standard. And again, that reflected over 70% of all the oil used. And we can see that hydrogenation took the oil and created a large number of trans fats in it. So typically trans fats in partial hydro oil account for 20 to 30% of the total fatty acids in there. And you can see it had an oxidative stability index of about 11 hours. But through our plant breeding, we've been able to then increase the oxidative stability of Omega-9 canola up to 16 hours. So, and again, without bringing any trans into the oil. So through that process, we've been able to create really naturally stable oils, which have then are being widely adopted by the food industry. And the advantage of these oils too, along with the stability, is if you look at the saturated fat content, we have the lowest level of saturated fat, which of course is very much in line with the dietary guidance. And we have virtually no trans fats. You get some trans fats formed by the refining process from the heat, but they're at a very, very low level. And so we have a very healthful oil that's got good stability. It's got a very high level of healthy monounsaturates. It's got a low level of sats and virtually no trans, and that gives the food industry a number of options then to replace hydrogenated oils. The key thing then for the industry, if you're going to bring fat as a third of our calories, a third of our diet, and it's used at these vast scales, you really need to have a reliable production system. And for a long time, canola really wasn't that well understood by the U.S. food industry, with the crop being primarily a Western Canadian crop. But to give a sense of the scale and scope of the canola footprint, the big part of the Canadian prairies would cover the distance from Winnipeg, Manitoba to Edmonton, Alberta. And that's about the same distance as Minneapolis to Dallas. And so the production footprint for canola is really about the same as the main soybean production region. And that's really important for production reliability and production security. And that's been a key part of our program, is to really ensure that we can deliver this oil at a large scale, that we can deliver it reliably, and that we've got good production security against environmental risk, weather, et cetera, et cetera. And to further help explain then what goes on to really bring our varieties forward and to really produce the crop, I'd like to introduce Greg Gingera. Greg's our head of plant breeding for canola here in North America. And Greg, turn it over to you to give some insights into how we create Omega-9 canola.
Thank you very much, Dave, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Canola is the third largest oil used globally, and so Dow AgroSciences has taken advantage of this volume to build what we call breeding and seed production capabilities in key geographies to try to deliver Omega-9 quality oil to the high-value markets. Our global headquarters is located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Dave already talked about that. And their role is really to provide key technology for us. Our North American breeding program is based out of Saskatoon. You saw a map on the previous slide. But we have significant yield testing capabilities and testing capabilities in North Dakota, in Minnesota, in Manitoba, and Alberta. Our off-site or off-season seed production, we've got scalable and large capabilities in Argentina and in Chile and South America that will deliver seed back to the northern hemisphere in time for the production season. And we've established 2 canola breeding programs in Europe, one in Germany and one in Denmark, that will deliver Omega-9 oil, a global supply, into that market. And last year we launched an Australian breeding program in eastern Australia to deliver Omega-9 seed quality and locally adapted hybrids into that market. So our goal at Dow AgroSciences is to build a worldwide presence in the key markets for Omega-9 oil as we continue to see that growth. So here's a photo of our Saskatoon Canola Research Facility. Obviously summer, it's grass. We still have quite a bit of snow on the ground, so there's anyway, it looks a little bit different now. However, we've been in our facility for a little more than 10 years. We are located on the Innovation Place Research Park at the University of Saskatchewan campus. In 2000, 2001, 2002, this building was built directly for us based on Dow Chemical and Dow AgroSciences security needs, our need for germplasm security, and something Dave hasn't talked about is our demand for isolation. The Omega-9 profile is very difficult to maintain, but we know how to do it genetically. We just need purity from other canola types. So we had a very strict standard on the types of containment we need for just to maintain germplasm security. We were in this facility for 8 or 9 years, and then went through a major upgrade, major retrofit, multi-million-dollar upgrade. What that's done is deliver additional capital equipment and facility upgrades for us that have really given us state-of-the-art genetic testing capabilities, state-of-the-art greenhouse and growth chambers that allow us to continue to advance material through a rapid cycle effort. We have 47 full-time employees directly engaged in canola breeding and development in Saskatoon. So Dow AgroSciences has a very large investment in Omega-9 canola breeding in this station. How do we get here? How do we do this? Well, to develop the Nexera seed, which is our seed brand associated with Omega-9 oil, the team a long time ago and currently analyzes many different canola and sunflower plants over several years to find parent lines with the best oil profiles. As Dave said, the oil is not a single piece. It's a mixture of various components. And so we've developed world-class analytical capabilities to determine those components and to find the real genetic variation that will allow us to find the next improved oil profile. once we found that variation, we used traditional or conventional plant breeding techniques to make crosses. You can see the pollen transfer between a couple of plants. We harvest the seed, we look at the seed, and then eventually we get to the point where we're able to sell that seed to growers in a good agronomic package. But essentially, we're still undergoing the process of continuing to refine the Omega-9 oil profile, add other components that will create higher value over the next couple of years. We do know that it's a very complicated trait to breed, but we've developed this kind of world-class capability to breed this material. Looking at the next slide, we're going to go to the field here. A couple of photos of our inbred nurseries throughout the field season. So every year we produce tens of thousands of potential Omega-9 inbreds in our greenhouse and growth chamber tissue culture facilities that we eventually need to get to the field to evaluate. So these inbreds are put in paired nursery rows. You can see in the upper left, they're pairs of materials. And we look at them for all sorts of traits: establishment, herbicide resistance. You can see in the upper left, there's a row there that's not going to survive. Vigor, days to flower, days to maturity. We'll look at all sorts of things like flower structure, pod structure, seed structure, and then eventually harvest a small sample of seed of each selected line for quality traits, including Omega-9 stability, as well as the other things that canola breeders look at: oil content, protein content. And our goal is to take these 10,000 potential inbreds, tens of thousands, and get them down to a little bit less than 1,000 of the material that we want to advance to the next testing phase. So much of our material gets one look and discarded, but that's how you make progress in the plant breeding program. Once we're through conducting our selections in North America, one thing that we've built is capability in central Chile to rapid cycle our material. So we can take our selections from North America, send them down to Chile beginning in mid to late September, and then we start to make our testing hybrids. So we'll take the different parents from, as I said, North America, put them in cages, small cages with pollinators. We start at the very first stage, which is the cages marked A. Those are very small cages. What we want to do is just get a very preliminary look of what the inbreds look like and what kind of hybrid seed would result. So we make hundreds and hundreds of these mini cages, we call them an A, and then we'll test them back in North America. Once we're confident that we've got something that has a stable profile, good agronomy, good performance, good maturity, then we'll invest the next level, which is the cages that we call it B. So we have fewer of them, but we produce quite a bit more hybrid seed, almost a kilogram of seed, so we can start to do really large multi-location trials just to start to take a look at adaptability, verify the Omega-9 profile. And then we have a couple of candidates that we put in large or very large cages that we call it C. These are candidates that are 1, perhaps maybe 2 years away from commercial sale. But these are the hybrids that we feel very, very confident in. We've had a couple of years of testing, and we really want to characterize. So what we've been able to do over the past couple of years is to build what I call a very strong pipeline of Omega-9 quality hybrids. We start with a large number of cages in A, move to a smaller number in B, and then the ones in C are the ones that we plan to commercialize within a year or two. Once we're finished with our hybrid seed production in Chile, and this is the time of the year actually when we're starting to receive some of that seed back, we start to plan our yield testing program back in Canada. So we call these being tested in a yield trial format. So instead of the paired rows like nursery evaluations, these are actually planted to 6 rows wide, about 20 feet long, and then we'll have them evaluated for the same kinds of agronomy that we looked at for the inbreds. We look for emergence, we look for establishment, days to flower. For earliness, we'll look at pod structure, pod set, days to maturity, and then finally we put a small plot combine through each of these plots to determine the yield, and then we'll take a small sample for quality. And only the best hybrids get moved along in the pipeline. The other 90 to 95% of the material gets discarded and never looked at again. But we always have a constant range of new inbreds coming through the pipeline that will help us recreate the next level of performance in the following years of hybrids. So here's just kind of a scope of what we call our Pike Lake, Saskatoon Nursery and Yield Trial location. This location, it's about 40 kilometers southwest of Saskatoon. We have a duplicate nursery yield trial set up about 1 hour northeast of Saskatoon, and that's just done to mitigate any kind of local weather events. Plus, it gives us a little bit of a different evaluation across other soil types. We have about 40 acres of plots and nursery rows planted at this location. And we, depending on the trial format and the number of hybrids, we'll have these kinds of experiments set up at up to 25 locations in Western Canada and in North Dakota. So some of the very earliest stage of testing, like if you remember those cages in A, those might be done at 5 or 6 locations, whereas the very large cages that were listed in C on that Chile photo would be planted at all 25 locations. Well, just depending on the level of investment and the level of confidence we have in the material, we will test differentially. And our main goal with these plots is to verify the Omega-9 profile, determine that profile is in a sound agronomic background that the growers would find useful for their operations, and also to double check on the other quality traits that are found in canola. So we really have a fully loaded pipeline of Omega-9 canola quality hybrids with the latest in agronomic traits. Omega-9 quality, the traits were created using natural genes that were found in canola. So we did not introduce any new genes to produce this quality trait. What we've done, and Dave talked about it earlier, was we screened and selected genes that can reliably produce the Omega-9 profile. And along the way, we found an awful lot of material that would produce it in some environments and not in others, and obviously we discarded that material. Some that was much less predictable from generation to generation, so we discarded that material as well. What we've learned over the past 15 to 20 years with this program is that we've very well understood the pathways involved in oil biosynthesis, and we're able to characterize their performance very quickly. As a plant breeder, my job is to evaluate the genetic and environmental stability of these inbreds and hybrids so that when we go to scale and start producing large amounts of Omega-9, that profile holds true. And the whole goal of the plant breeding program is to hit that green box, which is to produce environmentally and genetically stable varieties that will help produce a reliable oil supply for our customers. So I'm going to pass on to Dave Boer, who will talk a little bit about our commercial oil application. Dave?
Thank you, Greg, and thanks to everybody on the call today. And through advanced plant breeding, we can now minimize the effect of weather and climate on the quality of the oil being produced. And we've been able to scale the volume of Omega-9 oils and have produced a very stable quality crop across several years in environmental conditions. And the importance of this type of information or this consistency is because as we work with food companies, they have required specifications, whether it be shelf life or for the fatty acid profile of the product, that they want consistent for year to year. So this repeatability is extremely important with our end-use customers. You know, and canola is definitely a growth crop, as you've been hearing. There's more than 22 million acres seeded in North America. And in 2013, Dow AgroSciences processing and contracting partners produced more than, or nearly 2 million acres of Nexera canola, yielding more than 1.5 billion pounds of oil. This is a significant growth year over year if you look at 2011 by 250%. You know, and more than 40% of the canola used in the U.S. food industry is now Omega-9 canola. Experts predict continued growth, meaning that this is a scalable crop to continue to meet the food industry needs, with projections of the 2014 crop being as large as 24 million acres. And with this increased acreage and continued talk about increasing acreage, the capacity to process has also doubled. So if you look at the two comparison pie charts on the bottom from 2007 to 2012, you see a couple different companies have really increased their market share, and the overall market has really invested significantly into north of $1.5 billion in processing capacity. You know, so there's now 9 processing plants that supply canola to the U.S. food industry, and as we've mentioned before, canola is now the second largest oil used in the U.S. food industry. And along with the growth comes, we basically have to be cost competitive with this. And canola, amongst the other oils that are largely used in North America, canola has the least volatility and the closest price to soybean oil. And this is extremely important because as Omega-9 canola has high functionality, it also has to be cost competitive. And you can see the green line representing kind of soy at 0. The black line would be canola. Yellow corn, purple sun, and it shows where canola kind of stays fairly close to soybean oil and has been extremely competitive over the past 2 years. And this kind of all rolls into our ability to provide a reliable supply of highly functional oil at cost competitive values. And if you look at these 4 buckets that are listed here, These are really what we deliver to the food industry, both quick service, food service type restaurants, and consumer packaged good organizations. So that reliable supply is brought forth by Greg and that team, which is really focused on our plant breeding objectives, which lead to grower acceptance because the hybrids that we offer are extremely competitive, and we now have more than 1.5 billion pounds of oil available annually. The cost-competitive and efficient IP system that we've discussed is high-yielding, broadly adapting varieties so that we can go in that big scale of production area that Greg mentioned. Access to these 9 crushing facilities allows our end-use customers to have a lot of choices on who they work with, and significant investment on making our canola at par to commodity canola. The sensory of canola in general, and especially Omega-9 oil, clean, light flavor profile, which is highly important to the end-use customers. It's preferred over competitor oils because we can deliver the functionality that we talk about. And canola has the lowest level of saturated fat amongst commercial oils and is trans fat free. The functionality that we talk about comes from that very consistent fatty acid profile. Natural stability, so for companies looking for clean labels or the ability to not use antioxidants, definitely a plus with Omega-9 canola. We show extended fry life for food service organizations and extended shelf life for consumer packaged good companies. And many times we're 50% greater oxidative stability over other commercial oils. And so with that, I will pass it over to Mary LaGuardia, who's our market manager for Omega-9 oils.
Well, thank you, Dave. So Omega-9 oils really are widely used across all sectors of the food industry. And because they're naturally stable, Omega-9 oils replace partially hydrogenated oils and saturated fats with monounsaturated fats, which are heart healthy. This has helped food companies meet menu and label regulations, as well as dietary guideline recommendations, while delivering necessary oil functionality. Omega-9 oils are used for long fry life or product shelf life as desired. Food service frying operations can gain up to 50% more fry life compared to many trans fat-free alternatives. And this provides an opportunity for oil cost savings, as oil cost per day is reduced. And compared with commodity fry oils, Omega-9 oils significantly reduce polymerization, and that means cleaner frying operations, reducing costly downtime and cleanup. Because Omega-9 oils are naturally stable, they've replaced partially hydrogenated oils in processed foods. They are used as spray oils in snack foods and baked goods, cereals and bars, and other products that need oil stability for product freshness. And Omega-9 oils are also used in applications that require structure in addition to stability, such as shortenings or margarines, spreads. And in this case, Omega-9 oils are being used to manage the saturated fat content for better nutrition labels. Advances in fats and oils, like those developed from plant breeding, are typically combined with oil processing techniques, and those are the tools that food developers are using today to balance nutrition requirements, functional performance, and price. So all of these options come with pros and cons, ranging from their cost to their functionality and the nutritional differences. Omega-9 oils are a very important part of the scenario to help developers mix and match oils and processing techniques to get the right balance of nutrition, cost, and functionality. Our Culinary Research Center is located in Indianapolis, and it's staffed with food science and culinary experts. Many food companies today are relying on innovation partnerships to help them get to market smarter and faster. Equipped with application and product testing equipment, our Culinary Research Center is designed to help our clients understand the value of Omega-9 oils in their particular application. Here we're using the latest technologies, fats and oils, and applying those to Omega-9 oils and applying those to our customers' applications. This is an example of a perfect outcome of a partnership between Dow's Culinary Research Center and a food company client that was looking to balance an improved nutritional profile with needed functionality and at a very specific price point. So we worked closely with this manufacturer of microwave popcorn to design a naturally stable omega-9 canola oil blend, process that in a way to make this blend very stable throughout a very long product life cycle. And as you can see, the result was a dramatic improvement in nutrition, with saturated fats way down by 83% over the leading national brand. And this product actually beats the national brand in sensory comparisons. So it really is the right time for food companies to adopt omega-9 oils. As food labels and menus are revamped to take the bad fats out, omega-9 oils are replacing those with good fats. Our Culinary Research Center works with big food open innovation models to demonstrate the functionality for shelf life and sensory properties in packaged foods. And in fact, omega-9 oils have replaced over 1.5 billion pounds of trans fat and saturated fats to date. Widely available and cost competitive, omega-9 oils are better for business, offering one of the most cost-effective oil solutions on the market today. And with that, I'll transition back over to David Disiak to talk about MUFA research.
Thanks, Mary. As we touched on before, there's a lot of terminology in this area, and so I just ask you to keep in mind that monounsaturates, monos, MUFA, oleic, omega-9, they're all kind of interchangeable words. They all kind of talk about the same, a fatty acid, the same kind of an oil. And, over the years, a lot of work has been done around monos, and I'd just like to take a few slides to touch on that to kind of look at the health benefits that these oils bring. And they are really substantial. If we go back to the 2010 dietary guidelines, a large number of the points in the guidance really talk about getting more or a greater amount of healthier oils into the diet. And so the USDA talked about getting saturated fat to less than 10% of energy, so a reduction in saturates. The American Heart Association, in their guidance, they actually talk about getting saturates to less than 7% of total energy. Really getting trans fats out of the diet, and we know the action happening around GRAS status today. And also the need to reduce total calories in the diet that come from solid fats and added sugars. And then looking at foods to increase, they really talk about, in 1980, they would have been shocked at this, really about increasing the amount of oils in the diet to replace solid fats. And so those are, I think it's a really good example of how our understanding around oil in the diet is really good fats really promote good health, and that really is why key. So the guidance isn't to get fat out of the diet, the guidance really is to get good fat into the diet at a greater level. The Canola Council realized that there had been a lack of research being done in these new oils and what they offer. And so over the course of the last 5 years, they've actually funded a number of large clinical trials, which continue to this day. And here are some things really to summarize that they found. And we have to remember that MUFAs or monounsaturates are really at the core or central to the Mediterranean diet. The Mediterranean diet pattern has been recognized as probably the healthiest diet pattern that's known to us today. Going back, the North American diet pattern was really based around soy and corn oil. And soy and corn are very high in 18.2s, and MUFA is really in 18.1. So with this migration, we can see, we want to understand, do MUFAs coming out of canola and sunflower, for instance, have the same benefits as what you'd see with the MUFA that may come out of olive oil being used in the Mediterranean diet? And so really looking at omega-9 canola oil, you have an oil that really is the same profile as olive oil, but with half the saturated fat. And what these clinical studies have shown us, that we do see many of the same benefits that you get from the Mediterranean diet pattern. There's a significant reduction in blood cholesterol and total triglycerides. There is a improvement in insulin sensitivities for people that have metabolic syndrome or pre-diabetic. It can help mitigate the risk around their insulin sensitivity and blood sugar control. They're very impactful at reducing blood pressure. They have a good role to play and impacting endothelial function. So that's kind of the elasticity of the arteries and being able to, it's an important factor in helping prevent heart attack. And more recent research come out in the last year, and again, very similar to what's been seen in the Mediterranean diet, is that diets that are high in monounsaturates, these monounsaturates have an important role to play in actually helping to reduce body weight and adipose fat mass, that attractive fat that we accumulate around our midsection. And so it can actually help reduce that content. And the mechanism of action is understood. And so, the body burns different fatty acids differently. And having a diet that is high in MUFA, studies from Europe around the Mediterranean diet and emerging studies here are showing us that having a diet that's high in MUFA can actually help maintain and help improve our body weight, which is a key issue for society today. So good fats really do lead to better health. You can get a significant reduction in coronary heart disease. We know from the work that's been done that getting SATs out of the diet could prevent, over 11,000 heart attacks a year, and getting trans out to prevent, over 5,000 heart attacks a year. And so we're talking about really a pretty significant reduction. You can imagine if we could eliminate 10 to 20,000 heart attacks a year, so all the cost and the heartache that goes with that kind of a disease, could be really reduced by having healthier fats in our diet. So in summary, Omega-9 and this move away from trans fats and the need to have new and better oils in the diet has been a powerful force. There's been a lot of change in the kinds of oils and how they're used in the North American diet in the course of the last 5 to 7 years. And so Omega-9 is a very scalable oil that can meet the needs of the food service industry. It's got a proven production system, so it's got a reliable supply, one that's very scalable. Use of canola is really expanding. And, going back and doing the analysis by replacing hydrogenated oils, Omega-9 oils have removed over 1.5 billion pounds annually of bad fats from the American diet. So that's something that we're very proud of. And it shows by, you don't have to avoid fat, you just need to get good fats into the diet. Next, I'd just like to quickly talk about some of the things that we're doing at Dow AgroSciences and some of the events that we're participating in and some of the upcoming events that may have an impact on the food trade news. So we've got a calendar of events here over the course of 2014. These are the different trade shows that we are participating in. So if you happen to be at one of these, please stop by or seek us out. We'd be more than happy to spend more time to talk with you. So we do a lot of outreach into key trade shows, key industry conferences to further help promote and create awareness of these Omega-9 oils. I think the next big thing that's happening in the oils industry is, of course, the FDA action to take a look at the removal of GRAS status for partially hydrogenated oils. And so, of course, last November, there's a sudden announcement by the FDA that they want to remove GRAS for partial hydro oils. We've come to the close of the comment period, so there should be a ruling that will be happening sometime in the near future. And when that ruling happens, if you would like to speak with us about comments, about replacements, and et cetera, we'd be more than happy to do that. We can certainly make ourselves available. The next big thing is the menu labeling. We expect that there will be final regulations late this year, an implementation probably sometime in 2015. Of course, changing the kind of oil doesn't change the caloric content, but with much greater attention being paid to saturates and trans fats on the nutrition panels, we have a very, we can play an important role in really helping improve that nutrient profile of foods in restaurants. And so we've got a plan that we can work with operators and help them implement and helping to communicate what those benefits are. The last thing that we have underway, which we are quite excited about, is today we've talked about a lot of different health benefits that we see from incorporating higher amounts of monounsaturates into our diet. So then, therefore, if we can reduce this disease risk there must be then some true impact back that we can measure. And of course, healthcare costs are a very topical item today. And, a lot of our healthcare cost is self-inflicted from our diet and the impact on chronic disease. So if we're putting healthy oils into the diet, if we've taken that 1.5 billion pounds of trans fats out of the diet, then there should be some disease risk reduction that's happened, and there should be a cost associated with that, or benefit or cost reduction associated with that. So to go look at this, we got connected with two leading healthcare economists, Dr. John Cawley from Cornell University and Dr. Chad Meyerhofer from Lehigh University. And by using well-accepted methods of analysis, they were taking a look at what they would estimate to be the annual direct medical cost reduction associated with treating heart disease by having these oils into the diet. We anticipate that this study it's been accepted for being published in a leading healthcare journal. I expect that to happen sometimes in the second quarter. And I think it would be a really fascinating study because we can take a look at through plant science, through agriculture, changing the kind of oil that's available, having it widely adopted by the food industry, then having an impact on healthcare cost reduction. I think that'll be a first time that we can track that, and it's a fascinating study when you get to see it. So that brings an end to the program. I see that we kind of finished on time, and I believe I'll turn it back over to Jen, and I believe we've got time for some questions. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dave, and thank you to our presenters today. We do have one question already, and that is, will the slides be made available today, the presentation be made available today? Yes, we are hoping to make this presentation available within the course of the next couple of days. We have also recorded this webinar, and we'll be posting it on Omega-9oils.com in the short term, so you can listen back at any time for additional details on coverage. Well, if not, in the interest of time, we can go ahead and wrap up today's presentation. We really appreciate, again, your time and your presentation today. If you do have additional questions for the Omega-9 Oils team, feel free to reach out to me directly. That is my contact information and email on this slide. We'd be happy to take your questions and arrange interviews or any other details that you might need for your coverage. Thank you again for participating today, and we will hope to talk to you in the future.